Hey, what is going on, my man, Dr. Dave?
Dr. Joe, how the heck are you, bro?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. So, of course, we are here again on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. So, we want to welcome all of our listeners and viewers to this episode. And today, we're going to talk about branding.
Ooh,
Well, I want to be more specific, personal and professional branding, because we just want to let you all know that no animals were harmed in this episode
that is
because we're
correct. We want to
not
be
talking about
perfectly clear.
animal branding.
No,
Okay.
not
So
no animals
just,
harmed.
all right. So, with that, Dave, what are your thoughts on personal and professional branding to get us started?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was going to say something funny, but then I decided not to because it probably wouldn't be funny to anyone but me. So,
Yeah.
um, on that note, personal and professional branding, they're important. And back to
Mhm.
Joe. No, just kidding. So we're getting real good at this, a real short episode we're going to
Right.
turn in.
Yeah.
So we bring it up, we close it up. So yeah, why is personal and professional branding important? Well, it can help people to remember you, and it can also assist in positive or negative perceptions of how people perceive you or how you perceive others. And that is, and at the core of that is where our personal um, prejudices and biases reside. And that's not saying, we're not talking about racial or anything like that. Well, I guess inadvertent biases and prejudices based upon how we've grown up and our personal experiences and how we've developed over time. That those types of prejudices and biases, not some of the more conscious ones. We're staying away
Right.
from those.
Right.
So as we grow and develop, we start establishing our personal brand. And then as we mature and get into the workplace, we start establishing and refining our professional brand. I would argue very adamantly, it's hard to establish a professional brand as an infant, for instance, unless your parents are assisting you to get you on the baby food jar or something like that. So
Right.
it all starts with our personal brand and it evolves from there. So it could be that you're very good at school and you get good grades in school. It could be you wear, the most popular clothing brands. It could be the type of music you like or the types of activities you engage in. It could be sports. It could be religious or spiritually affiliated. It could be a variety of things. It could be the foods that you like. All those things can contribute to your personal and professional brand. The colors that you wear, um, whether you decide to wear glasses or contacts,
Right. Yeah.
you know, these type of earbuds or ear devices, or like what Joe's wearing. I mean, all
Yep.
these things, backgrounds, logos, these are all things that help with personal and professional branding. So, yeah, and I think it's kind of a fun topic because
Yeah.
you can actually change your brands depending on your mood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to go to a bar where they play country music, you might decide to wear a cowboy hat
Right.
or a cowgirl hat or a cow person hat. Or if you want to go to a Comic Con, maybe you dress up in a certain type of um, costume or outfit. So, it just depends. Some maybe for those of you like ink, I like personal ink, a little bit of branding or whatever. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
whether you display it or not display it, your haircuts. I'm still trying to get Joe to follow the old comb
Yeah.
over,
It's
and
not
he's
gonna
still trying to
happen.
get me to just trim it back a lot. So, again, branding, and it's fun. It can be fun.
Right.
So, and the same with your professional brand. It can be fun. I would assert that on the professional side, it might be a little bit more of a conscious and deliberate effort
Right. Yep.
because, and you want to be consistent. If you brand yourself professionally as, someone who wears a suit and tie,
Mm-hmm.
and the social expectation then becomes for you to wear that type of
Yeah.
attire because that's the brand you've established or the brand that they prefer. If you were to show up in cut off shorts and a tank top and flip flops, you might take them aback a little bit, and they
Right.
may
Yeah.
perhaps depending on the environment, ask you to change back into your previous brand
Yep.
of attire. So those are my introductory thoughts. Dr. Joe, what are yours?
All right. So, Dr. Dave, that was a very good start. I mean, you really touched on the essence of branding, personal and professional branding. And so, this has been a more recent thing for probably many of us, the branding piece, because, when people think of brands, they think of the big brands out there, and rather than say all the names and all that. But if you just really pay attention to, commercials, billboards, and things like that, you're going to see those brands that you recognize day in, day out for years.
Mhm.
And so when we start talking about our personal brand and professional brand, first time I heard it, I mean, I really thought, wow, that is very cool to brand yourself, to be a personal brand. And then to your point, can be fun. It can also be a telltale sign of who you really are. So
Right,
it,
right.
it could be a lot of different things, but I really like the fact that it's yours. You just like everything else, you develop it, you create it. And to your point about the professional branding, I went through that phase right after, or not necessarily after I became a doctor. I think actually it might have been right after I became a doctor or shortly before I defended my dissertation. And I thought, now that I'm going to be a doctor, now I'm going to have to start dressing professional. So I started wearing ties.
Yeah.
I didn't
And I
necessarily
told
wear
you not to wear the cutoff shorts. I told you they've
yeah,
been out
yeah,
for a
the tie and
while.
the shirt, man, and then I wore the short. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, but that was my thought, that I wanted to present this professional brand,
Mhm.
and it started, and I wasn't wearing suits, but what I was wearing was a button down shirt, and I actually tried to bring the sweater vest back, so I can go to my closet right now, and I probably
And
have 15.
how successful were you?
I pulled it off for probably about 6 months. I really did. Was pretty
Right.
pretty persistent about wearing, and then even one of my group of employees, for Christmas they actually bought me a sweater vest. So it was kind of a cool thing, but that became my personal brand. I even had people when I'd come into meetings, they were like, "Are you in an interview, or what? Are you going to meet somebody?"
I
And I
think
was
that's the
like,
funniest thing. You dress nice and people automatically assume that you're
"Just
looking for another
assume
job. And it's
exactly."
like, I maybe I just want to feel good about myself.
And so that's what it was for me. Again, when I became a doctor, I thought, this is who I wanted to be as far as a professional. And it really was kind of a personal, but more professional brand, because it was the work environment. Because at home, I'd still wear my normal attire, but at work, I really wanted to put off this image of this doctor now, and it didn't work external. For me, I felt good about being able to present myself that way, but at the same time, I knew it wasn't me. And
Right.
so I reverted back to just casual wear, because that's what I was most comfortable with. So, we talk about personal branding and professional branding, make sure it's who you are.
Yeah.
It's the image that you really want to portray. I mean, I did enjoy portraying the professional look, but at the same time, that wasn't me. Even on our podcast, what do you normally see me wearing? These types of shirts or t-shirt, or I don't think I've done any episode in a button-down shirt, because I'm more comfortable in this. This is who I am as far as the image that you see. When I go out, and especially in the summertime, I wear shorts and a nice, just a shirt like this. So I got caught up in it, or hung up in the imagery of it, or the portrayal of that professional brand. But since I've toned it down way as far as the image portion.
Mhm.
But as far as the personal branding, who I am, that's remained a constant. That really has, and it really kind of goes back to my purpose. And we've a couple of episodes before, we talked about purpose, and it really comes down to what I want to be known for as my personal brand. It is, again, someone who wants to help others get to the next level, and that's my personal brand. And I'll tell you just a quick kind of a caveat to that, which reaffirmed this was, one of our viewers, listeners, she, I know her, she's, at work, and she said, hey, um, I think, and she said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you are a person that wants to help people get to the next level. And I thought that was very cool that that was the image that I was portraying for my personal brand, that I want to help others. So I thought that was spot on. And it was just reaffirming to me that that's the personal brand that I'm trying to portray and that it came across. So that was very cool to actually hear someone say the almost exact thing that I say about what my brand is or who I am. So I thought that was very cool. And I know you were trying to jump in there
Yeah.
really quick.
Joe, I
Um,
wanted to say I really like what you said there because I was just getting ready to segue away from the visual branding
right,
and start talking about the other types of branding. There's educational branding, there's um, career choice and employer branding, there's the branding of who we are inside of ourselves. Like you
right.
said, coming
Yeah,
across as someone that's helping. That's not necessarily a visual brand to
right,
say, oh,
right,
well, if you like to help people, then that's blue or purple or green or
right,
red.
right.
It's more of a behavioral branding, and actually that's really what it is. It's a behavioral branding.
Hmm.
So it can have a spiritual or religious branding or political, and I know we're starting to get into some of the demographics, but those are different types of branding as well. It could be experiential branding. you know it could be, if you went through a certain event, you know there are environmental events that you can share those experiences with other people, and it's not to separate, but that's that cohesive piece, that piece that links. And that's really what branding is about. It's about linking who you are to another person or entity.
Right, right.
And we can actually go back, probably 50 years. The Dress for Success was a visual
Yeah,
brand.
yeah,
So as we've moved forward in time, getting into the educational piece, well, more education was better. So then that became a brand. And then,
right,
we talked about the visual brands. And then, going back to the behavioral brands, are you a nice person? Are you respectful? Are
right.
you
Yeah,
disrespectful? Are you, who do you identify with? Who do you identify yourself with? Those are all brands that are non-visual, so it's important to consider that, not only is it what you say and how you say it, but who you are as a person and the behaviors that you exhibit. Those are also types of branding. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the one statement that I've heard in this whole branding conversation that from other people, and I agree with it 100%, is how you come across to other people, or
Yeah.
how you're going to
Perception.
be
Yep.
remembered. To
Yeah.
me, that's probably one of the most important, factors of the whole branding piece, is because you could think you're portraying this image of being this type of person and you're not. So that's
Yeah.
why I say I it was really reassuring to me when a colleague said it the way that I would say it. And so again, that to me just validates that's my personal brand.
Mhm.
That's who I want to be, and that's who people see me as. And so that's the way I view the personal brand as, how are people going to remember you when they start talking about you when you're not in the room? What do they say about you?
Yeah.
When I think of personal brand, and like you say, not the visual part of it, but the other side of it, the internal piece. What are people saying about you? If they refer you, why are they referring you? If
Mhm.
if your name comes up, what type of conversations are being had? And that's why I say so I think with my colleague, if somebody says, hey, do you know Dr. Joe Hamlet, I think that would be the message that she would relay to people. And so to me, that's way more powerful than me even saying it, because somebody
Sure.
else views me that way. And so for me, that's what I think of when I think of personal branding
Mhm.
and professional branding, because I mean those two could cross the line as me helping someone get to that next level. So
Yeah.
So for me, that's, everything you said makes sense. But at the end of the day, it's about, like you say, the image you may be portraying is not the perception or the reception on the
Sure,
other
sure.
end. So that's why I view it, or that would be my gauge, is what would people say about you, when you're not around, or if somebody asks that
Yeah.
question. So
It does get back to the visual and behavioral branding. I mean, you could be the perfectly dressed person for your
right,
employer, and that's what they like. But if you're habitually late for work,
right,
or you're
right,
disrespectful to people, what type of brand are you portraying?
right. Yep,
So
yep,
it's really boiling down to being very conscious, and I'm not saying paranoid, but just conscious of the image that you're presenting, because that image that you present and how it's interpreted is your brand.
right.
And I'm
Absolutely,
not saying to pretend to be something that you're not, because I think that's not an accurate representation of
absolutely.
a
Yep,
brand. A
yep.
brand is more integral to represent your being versus an adaptation to fit in.
Right,
So,
exactly. Yep.
um, like, I'm pretty sure that if I went to one major sports brand wearing a different sports brand that's a major competitor, that would be a, probably not well received if I worked
Right,
for the the first professional brand.
right, right, right.
They may not appreciate
Yep.
my sense of humor, or maybe they would.
Yeah. So
So
yeah, I just I think, again, personal branding. We've, like you said, it's been established for a long time, but this is, last few years is being
yeah,
coined as, personal branding, professional branding. But like you said, it really starts as a child. Yeah, even you talk about the getting your baby on a jar, and I actually went through that process. I think my mom told me when I was a baby that they wanted to put me on one of the uh, food brands back in the
nice.
day, 50 something years ago. But
And
it's
you don't look a
funny.
day different, do you?
I know, I still look the same. I didn't have any hair. I got more teeth than I did back
Oh,
then.
yeah,
But
a couple.
yeah. So it's just funny that, that was that imagery that I think of when you said that, and I was it just really hit home with, because I know my mom talked about that process. So it's just funny that that's when our brand could start. That even if you think about some of the, major companies out there, that their logos are, you think of that right away. And so um but I want to really touch on what you said about the trying to put on the imagery, but it doesn't match who you are. And I think that's somewhat what I was trying to do once I became a doctor, when, thought I had to wear this image of that representation of being a doctor, which that's what I thought. And if I really think about it, if I was in academia or somewhere else, it might have been appropriate, but in a organization where I was in a manufacturing environment, it didn't fit the bill. So when you think about your imagery of your professional branding, it almost, they did touch on it, dress for success almost, but also dress that matches the environment. So
Yeah.
uh, you get
We've all heard the faux pas of being in a virtual meeting and then standing up and wearing
right,
swimming trunks,
right,
or flip-flops and cut off shorts,
yeah,
so
yeah,
make sure that when you stand up from a meeting, you're appropriately dressed. That's
yep,
one of those lessons that we hear about. And it's just like the old reply to all inadvertently.
right,
That's a form of branding.
yeah,
um a couple more types that I'd like to discuss, excuse me. So is social branding, and we can talk about
mm,
social media. Excuse me. um, Social media, what you present, how your images, your photos, your posts,
mhm,
those all start establishing a brand for you. And if you're consistently making posts against or for a certain thing, that becomes part of your brand.
mhm,
Your resume on some of the professional networking sites
right.
and your profiles, those become part of your brand, just like business cards or email signatures. Those are part of your brand. um, Interviewing, how you interview, starts to is probably one of the earlier steps to branding for yourself for a company, along with
Mhm.
your resume, right? Because a resume gets you the interview gets you the job, ideally. So how you present yourselves on paper and in person or virtually, depending on the interview, those all become part of your brand.
Right.
I mentioned in one of our previous episodes, I had applied for and then was interviewing for a management position. And when I interview, or when I used to interview, and when I teach, I wear a bow tie. That's part of my brand. And that's how they remembered me. When I was hired on, it wasn't, oh, there's Dave, or there's Dr. Peltz, or that's, what's his name? It's like, oh, there's the guy who wore the bow tie, the bow tie guy. And I swear that was my name for the first 3 weeks, was bow tie guy. BTG. I don't know. It's like, I don't understand it, but it's my name tag says Dave, but you still call me bow tie guy. Maybe there's something lost in translation. So, yeah. So just keep in mind that there's again, when we talk about branding, there's so many different levels now. It's
Right.
not just you know dress for success, or the piece of paper that your resume is written on.
Right.
It's so much more.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Even in today's environment, social media, it has defined a lot of us. Like you said, if you look at our
For better or
profiles,
for worse,
or
depending.
exactly. So, you become whatever you post or whatever you
Mhm.
say. And so that is one of those areas where branding could definitely be a detriment if you're
Yeah.
using it incorrectly, or not really sure how to use it. That could be a very bad situation for you. I mean, I know even in the military, um, you know, our young airmen were encouraged not to go on to social media and just blast things out and
Yeah.
and things like that. And then even you know the integrity piece comes into play. We had instances where people would say they were doing certain things, and then you'd see them on Facebook or something. So it
Yeah.
just it
You can't post on social, well, you can't post on social media that you're working hard, and then 5 minutes later you post pictures of you at the golf
right,
course, or at the movie
absolutely,
theater, or at the beach,
absolutely.
or in
Yeah,
in a foreign country on the
yeah,
beach. It creates kind of a disparity.
right,
So
right.
yeah,
uh,
I mean, and the branding, branding. I mean, it's really just that. I mean, it's how you're portrayed, or at least how you're perceived.
right,
Because
right.
if you say, I like the beach twice, and you're being sarcastic, and it doesn't come across, the sarcasm does not translate, I might think that Joe really loves the beach, and
Right,
he may
absolutely.
absolutely despise it.
Yeah, yeah,
So again, it's what you say, how you say it, and the behaviors that
yeah,
back it up. And until we figure out a way to get all this stuff out of the internet, it's going to be out there for people to look at. And fortunately or unfortunately, um, employers do view
right, right,
employees' social media accounts.
right,
And I've heard the argument, well, that infringes upon my right to free speech. And it's, yes, sort of. But remember, you're working for a company, and if they're trying to maintain a certain brand,
right.
and
Yep,
you're saying something or doing something counter to that
yep,
brand that they're taking pride in maintaining, then that can create some potential conflict. So be
right,
aware of it. I mean, it doesn't take away from your choices, but it just means that some of your choices are going to have potentially more ramifications, and some may be desirable and some may not be desirable.
right. So I think it goes back to what you said earlier about the perception piece. Whatever image you're trying to portray as your brand, it could easily be changed by, like you said,
Mhm.
what's out there, and the way people receive it. Like you said, the basic comment about beach, and like you said, to your point, I may be saying it sarcastically, but somebody else they think that I love the beach. So it just, again, that perception piece, that imagery that you're trying to portray may not come across that way. So Like I said, it was just for me reassuring to know the personal brand that I am portraying, that I'm throwing out there, is being received that way. And it may not be received that way for everybody, but for in one case anyway, it was perceived that way. So um
And doing and not doing something is another brand. And the reason I
right,
bring that up is think about going to a restaurant and you order your food and the service is bad or the food is bad. If you choose not to say something, you're facilitating that those
right,
particular
right,
behaviors or branding
right,
for that facility or for that person that's providing those services to you. They may not know, or they may just
right,
think it's okay to provide a bad product or poor product and poor service
right.
because no one said anything,
Yep.
counter to that. So, what we do and don't do, what we say and don't say can facilitate certain perceptions or attitudes or behaviors of branding as well.
Right. Right. So anything else that we could add to the branding space, personal or professional,
I
I
think
think.
we can add in, and we might have already said this. You can change your brand. Just be aware. And
Right.
I get it. If you're at work and you wear a suit and tie, and then there's an after work casual get together,
Right.
you may
Right.
or may not want to wear that suit and tie. You may want to dress down a little bit more to something more casual, or you may not. It just depends on the perception that you want to exude. And
Right.
sometimes the people with more rank and authority or capacity might dress a little bit more formal or less formal, just depending on the brand that they want to be perceived by, or the brand that they want to project. And
Right.
that's okay. And now we're getting into kind of like the leadership side of things and how leaders of organizations can facilitate a certain type of brand. If a leader is saying, I want everyone to wear suits to work, and then they show up in the famous cutoff shorts and tank
Right.
tops and flip flops,
Right.
that's kind of a counterintuitive behavior to the brand that they're trying to create, unless their brand is the employees below them dress with suits, and the employees that are equal to that person can dress in cutoff shorts and tank tops and flip flops.
Well, you bring that up, and I have a quick, just story about a situation like that. So I was, being a senior leader in the military, enlisted leader. I was invited to a after hours event. Like I said, during the day we're wearing a uniform, so that's a given. That's
Mhm.
easy. But in the after hours event, uh, I had never gone to an event with uh, my the officer that I was assigned to or reported to, and so he was a 2-star general, and I just assumed, casual, and so we made plans to meet at the elevator before going up to this event. It was on the rooftop, which was pretty cool. But he said, "Hey, I'll meet you at 6 o'clock." I said, "Okay." So again, back to my sweater reference I made, or sweater vest. Again, for me, I thought that was decent enough, slacks, button down shirt with the sweater vest on. And so I show up, he's standing there waiting. And what is he wearing? He's wearing a blazer, button down shirt, and casual slacks. And he looks at me and he didn't have to say one word.
You turned right back
I
around, went out and got a jacket.
no, I didn't bring a jacket. I thought
Oh.
it was going to be, yeah. So I could tell by his look and his non-comment that I didn't meet the standard, as far as the image that I was supposed to portray in that position. So that was the only time that I had to go through that scenario, because I knew the next time we met what the expectation was. So when we think about, to your point about the branding and the expectation, maybe that conversation should be had,
Yeah,
so that's also a good point, that you may think that your imagery is just fine, but it may not meet that particular standard. So I think
right.
that's also a very good point to make, that you may think you're portraying what you should, but at the same time it doesn't meet the standard. So I think that's important, especially when you're representing an organization. If it's just you, that's a different story, to a point, because
Mhm.
like you said, your organization may be trying to portray a certain image and you go totally against that. So I just thought that was appropriate in what you just said, that how, again, your own perception of what the call out is may not meet the standards of somebody else. So I think that's also important when we think about that branding piece.
Yeah, and I want to apologize. One of my brands is I always turn off my phone, and I failed to mute it this time. So that little extra chime is a kind of a reminder for me to adhere to, as you were talking about, social norms and
Yeah,
expectations.
yeah,
So really, I think that's kind of a nice way to kind of bring things together. There's your own personal brand, there's your professional brand, and then
right,
there's the social expectations and norms, or social norms and expectations side of branding.
right.
Especially for those folks who work out of country or visit other countries, that's something to be
Oh,
aware of.
absolutely. Yeah.
So with that, any final thoughts, words of wisdom there, Dr. Joe?
I'm gonna end it with this again. If we think back to personal branding and professional branding, it's still, there's the visual piece of it, the imagery that you can see, but at the same time, we also have to make sure we're cognizant of the non visual image that we're portraying as far as our branding, that people, that impression that you leave on them may overwhelm the image that they see. Again, it could be, you could be dressed to the T and meet all those standards, but at the same time, you have a terrible attitude, or you don't meet those standards. So just make sure that the picture or image you're trying to portray matches.
Right.
Again, because that's definitely confusing to people to see one thing and then hear another. So,
Yeah, it doesn't
and
make it
I'm
right or wrong. It's just something to be aware of.
right. But again, it's because it's based on all of our own perceptions of what we take from that individual or that encounter or that situation. So it's still really us to try and portray the image, both verbal, visual, that we want people to remember us for. And so I think I'm closing this one out,
Uh,
but I want to give you an opportunity before I close it out with anything else that you want to finish up with.
Joe, I think we did a pretty good job. If I can toot our horn, toot toot. Yeah, I'm good with this one. So bring it home.
Okay. All right. So again, we want to thank you all for tuning in, listening, viewing this episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And as we always say, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.